Hi, today's daf is daf tes. We will begin in daf ches Samid Beis, in the middle of the page by the two dots gufa. So this is considered one of the more difficult daf to follow in Daf Yomi, but because we have the presentations and the visuals, it's going to be a lot easier. The Gemara begins like this: Rabbi Yomer, Kufa we learned before. Rabbi Yomer. So just to recap, we have two psukim that, according to our first Tana, that taught us how do you know that when your sister falls to Yibam, you don't do Yibam, and not only you don't do Yibam for her, but you don't also do Yibam for the co-wife. So the Gemara said before that our Tana learned it from this V'isha lachois loisikach litzrar, that we're not allowed to marry two sisters. Legalis ervase oleha b'chayeha. On a yibum situation, you're not allowed to marry two sisters, and not only that, the co-wife is also forbidden. That was the sheet of the Tana of the Brisa. Then we saw a sheet of Rebbe who says, I know this concept from another pasuk, from the regular pasuk of Yibam. The pasuk says, "Ki yeshua achem yachtu v'meis eichem and meis achem nobody beis and bein ein loy." The Yavama has to take this woman for a wife and take her out from being a Yibam. So let us see what the Gemara says. Gufa we learned before. Rabbi Yomer. Now, the way the Gemara is going to go is, what is Rebbe going to do with the other psukim, the psukim that the other Tana used? So let's just see. Gufa Rabbi Yomer. V'lokach. It could have said the word v'lakach loy leisha. Ulkacha, it says the word he takes her for a wife. V'yibim, it says he takes her for he takes her out of being a yavam. V'yibma takes her out from being a yavam. So what does this come to teach you? La'asar tsarais v'arais. If there's an erva falling to yibam, you don't do yibam for her, and for her co-wife, you don't do yibam for her either. So they both go out without Yibam and Chalitza. So the Gemara asks, the first question is to understand where did Rebbe see this in the pasuk? Midai tsaris ksiva hacha. Does it say the word tsaris in the pasuk? It doesn't say the word tsaris in the pasuk. That pasuk is only talking about a regular Yibam. You see, according to the Chachamim, it had the word tsara. The pasuk did discuss the word co-wife. Here, it doesn't discuss, if you're learning it from this pasuk, where does it say the word co-wife over here? So the Gemara says over here, another question is tsaris militzral nafka. Didn't we learn tsaris that the co-wife, you don't do yibam on the co-wife, from the other pasuk, what the Chachamim learned from litzra? The word litzrar teaches you that you don't do yibam on the co-wife. So the Gemara first answers the second question and then gets back to the first question. First of all, what does the Rebbe do with the word litzrar in the previous pasuk? Litzrar mapik le Rebbe lik the Rab Shimon. He uses it like what Rab Shimon says. So what does Rab Shimon say? So then Rab Shimon says, so he uses the word litzrar, what Rebbe holds like Reb Shimon. It's in this case, you have three brothers. Two of the brothers married sisters, and they both died. So now two sisters from two different brothers fall to Yibam, to that remaining brother that remained alive. According to the Chachamim, you can't do Yibam in either one of them, but technically you could. And therefore, the Chachams, because they're not sisters falling from the same person, they're falling from different people. So therefore, the Chachams say that you have to do Chalitza because it looks like two sisters, that you're marrying two sisters. And so therefore, Chachams say you do Chalitza. Rab Shimon says, Poite b'shteim in a Chalitza min yibim. In this case, although the two sisters are coming from two different brothers, they are potter from Chalitza and Yibam. And he learns it out from the Pasuk Litzrar, and the time that they become tsaris zu lezu. For example, over here, that when two sisters fall to Yibam from two different brothers, then you don't do anything. There's not even a obligation to do Yibam. and certainly no obligation to do chalitza, and therefore they go out free. So he learns that concept from Litzrar. So I wanted you to visualize it. You have Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Reuven and Shimon are married to two different sisters, and they both pass away. Technically, according to the Chachamim, Levi could either make Yibam on Leah or make Yibam on Rachel. But because they're two sisters falling at the same time to Yibam, the advice is to do Chalitza and not to do Yibam. Comes along Rab Shimon, and he says that Levi has to do nothing. He doesn't do Chalitza and he doesn't do Yibam, because since they're falling at the same time, he learns Litzrar when two sisters fall to Yibam at the same times and they're co-wives to each other through this Yibam. You don't do Chalitza or Yibam. So this is what Rebbe uses the word Litzrar to teach you that concept in the previous pasuk that the Chachamim used. Fine. Now the Gemara says, Tzara Hachaksiv, does it say the word? Go back to the first question. How did Rebbe know that a tzara of an erva you don't do yibam for? Let's say your daughter falls to yibam. The daughter falls to yibam. Not only you don't do yibam on the daughter, but you don't do yibam on the tzara. So the Gemara says, Hachi kama. This is the way you have to learn Pshat and Rebbe. Im kain lema karav lokach. That the Torah said, you should take this person, lokach loylishi, you take this person for a wife. My ulakacha, you take her, but not the other one. So what is the pasuk talking about? It's talking about when two people are falling to Yibam. And the pasuk is telling you, if it was possible to take anyone, either one, the boynos of high, the boynos of high, you could have married any one of your wives, of the women that were the wives of your brother. You could marry this one or that one. Sharia, then you're permitted to do Yibam. But if one of them is also to you, then they're both asar. So the tzara of the erva that falls to yibam is asar. So that what V'lakacha teaches you, and this is what Rebbe uses the word v'yibma. When is it tzara? Also bim kain yibam hu da'asir tzara. Only if they fall to yibam, then you don't do yibam with the erva and the co-wife. Shloi bim kain yibam. But if an erva was married to another person and they're not, and you just want to marry the co-wife of that person, a co-wife of that erva, sharia, then it's permitted, because it's not b'mkoim mitzvah. Sharia tzara, the tzara is permitted. So now Rebbe had a smooth drasha from this pasuk l'kacha and v'yibma to learn the same idea that if an erva falls to yibam, not only you don't do yibam on the erva, but you don't do yibam on the tzara, on the co-wife. So the Gemara's question is, what does Rabbanan do with this pasuk l'kacha and v'yibma? That's the next question, obvious question. The Gemara asks, Rabbanim hai l'kacha mai avdilei. What did they do with the word l'kacha? So the Gemara says, Miboyale Rabbi Yosef Bachanina teaches you the idea of Rabbi Yosef Bachanina, and this is a universal general law regarding Yibam. Teaches you a new halacha. Rabbi Yosef Bachanina ulakacha, when you marry your Yavama, you can divorce her and take her back, because once she becomes your wife, she loses that erva called Eishesach, your brother's wife, so that if you would divorce her, you're permitted to take her back. So she's like a regular wife where you can divorce as long as she doesn't marry somebody else. You can remarry her. So I would have thought that maybe since this was once your brother's wife, once you divorce her, you lose your chances. That if you do divorce her, you are permitted to take her back, because once you married her, she's your regular, like a regular wife. The Yibma, what it teaches that you should do Yibim. So the Rabbanan teach you al karcha, that if the Yavam has relations with the Yavama against her will, she automatically becomes his husband. He automatically becomes her husband, because Yibam doesn't need her her ratzon, her desire to do so. Even if he did it against her will, and just with Bia alone, he could do Yibam, it still will take effect, and that's teaching of the word v'yima. So the Chachamim had a teaching from the word l'kacha and a teaching from the word v'yima. The Rebbe, how does Rebbe know these two ideas? One, that this becomes your regular wife, and two, that you could do yavam bal karcha. The Rabbi Yosef Bachanina nafka isha. he learns that from the idea of Rabbi Yosef Hanina, where it says, you take this woman as your wife. Once it's nafke, once it becomes your wife, fine. That's the teaching enough. That's your regular wife. Al karcha, where do you see the idea that you can do yibam against her will? So it says yavama yavoy ala. The yavama should cohabitate with her nafke, and yavoy means it's the yavam that decides this marriage. It's nothing. We don't even ask her. So it's mashma that it can happen. It implies that it can happen even against her will. Yavama yavoy ala. So now we establish what the chachamim do with lekacha, what the chachamim do with biyibma, and those two teachings. How does Rebbe know those two teachings from the pasuk? From one, he knows it from Isha, lekacha loy Isha, and one he knows Yavama the Isha. One it's Yavama Yavayalaha. Fine. So that brings us to the next question. The next question is, what does Rebbe do with this pasuk? This pasuk is completely extra, Aleha and Litzra. So let's see what the Gemara says. The Rebbe, hi Aleha, my avidle. What does he do with the word Aleha? So the Gemara says, he needs it also. Why? The Tanya to teach you another teaching. There's a pasuk. Let's get this up. There's a pasuk that says that if the entire tzibur, that's called par harem davashatif, the entire tzibur did one abira, then they bring one cow to atone for the entire tzibur. If the kohen Mashiach does an avera, he also brings a par. These are psukim in Parshas Vayikra. When a yachid does an avera, he can bring a sheep or a goat, and when a nasi or a melech does an avera, they bring a seir, a male goat, not a female goat like a yachid, like an individual, but they bring a male goat. And same, the 6 things you have to know here. Tzibur, that does, if the entire congregation does avodah zarah, based on the psak of the bezdin, so then they bring a par for an oila, okay? He bring a par ben bakah echad la'oila, and then usir izim echad lechatas, and one goat for a chatas. Fine. And then if a yachid does avodah zarah, then the Torah says you just bring one goat, no oiler, no, just a goat for a chatas. Fine. But here, what the Gemara is, how do you know what avera does the whole tzibur have to do in order for them to bring this par? Maybe it's just any small avera that's not a big avera. If the whole tzibur, let's say, is disrespectful to their parents, so then because of the psak of bezin, do you bring a par for that? What averas do you bring a par? The Torah just says, "In kol adas Yisrael yishku v'nelam adav meina kol kol," and then you bring this. But the Torah doesn't specify what type of avera you have to do. And same thing by all these karbanos. The Torah says, "Bring this carbon," but the Torah doesn't tell you what avera did you do. So this is the teaching of Allah. It's a fabulous teaching. Let's see. Brisa says, "Ein chayovim bezdin ela adova shesudoina kragaris v'shigos echates v'chein hamashiach." When the entire congregation does something wrong through the psak of bezdin, so you bring a cow. That's the first thing. It has to be something, an avera that b'mezid you get karis. B'mezid you get karis for that, and that's the point. The point is b'mezid, and so that therefore it's such a type of avera that bezdin gave you a heter on. So then, b'shoigeg, when they paskin wrong, you bring the par, okay? The chein hamashiach, and also the kohen Mashiach. When we say that he brings an extra carbon, we said that the kohen Mashiach, when the kohen Mashiach over here brings an extra also a par, in kohen Mashiach yachta, what type of avera does he bring a par? The answer is it's an avera that it's a loisese, that if you did it on purpose, you would get kares. So the par gets kares, and Kohen Mashiach gets, the tzibor gets kares, and Kohen Mashiach, it's an avera that you would get kares for. And we don't know exactly how you see it. V'loi ba'avodah zarah. The tzibor does not have to bring a par for an oil and a sorah for a chatas, only on type of avodah zarah that you do. In other words, only if there would be, forget the word b'shigase chatas. We're trying to learn what chatas you have to bring, but the only time you'll bring this avodah zarah of par oila and sorry chatas is only if you did avodah zarah, that if you would do that on purpose, you would get kares. For example, you shechted, or you brought incense, or you did nisach hayayin for the avodah zarah, or you bowed to the avodah zarah. All these things, if you do it on purpose, you get kares. But hugging or kissing the avodah zarah, it was only a lav. You don't get you don't get kares for that. If Bezdin made a mistake and the whole tzibur did avodah zarah by hugging and kissing an avodah zarah, then there would be no sa'ir. You would not bring that. You would not bring the parla oil and sa'ir lechatas. It's only if Bezdin paskin something that if you would have done it on purpose, you would get kares, and and that type of thing. If Bezdin said you couldn't do it, and then they realized they made a mistake, then you would bring the parla oil sharlachatis. Utnanami, and we still don't know where you know that from. Utnanami, and here sums it all up. Kol mitzvah shabbatayra shechayavin as doine kares. And any mitzvah that b'mezid yichayev kares, let's skip these words, because if you b'mezid yichayev kares, if you do it by mistake, yachid maybe kiz by sira. If you're an individual and you did that aveira, right? So then you would bring a carbon kasev or a female sheep or female goat. For example, let's say Shabbos. If the person's machal Shabbos, as you know, b'mezid you would have gotten kares even when there's nobody watching you. So therefore, they'll aid him. So therefore, if you did it by mistake, you bring a kizba or a seira, female sheep or a female goat. Nasi, if a nasi made that error, or president or melech, maybe sar would be a male goat. Mashiach or Bezdin, Mevi and Par. Mashiach and the entire Bezdin that made this mistake on behalf of Klal Yisrael, they bring a par. Uva avodah zarah. When it comes to avodah zarah, yachid, if an individual makes this does an avodah zarah, does a vera of avodah zarah, nasi or Mashiach, and it's all by mistake. Mevian seira, they bring a female goat. Unlike by a regular avera, they have a choice. They can bring a kizba or a seira. If it's an avodah zarah mistake, the individual, the president, and the Mashiach, Kohen Mashiach, all the Kohen Gadol, all bring this seira. Sibor, by the way, Mashiach is a Kohen Mashiach. During the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, they would anoint these Kohanim. So the Kohen Gadol, who's Mashiach. Tzibur, if it's Tzibur makes a mistake in avodah zarah, Mevi and Par Basar, as we saw, we saw the Pars la'oila and Sari lechatas. Par la'oila, Sari lechatas. So now we get back to the story, and we still don't know where does Aleha fit into all this. How do I know the first thing? The first thing we discussed, that Bezdin only brings a special carbon of a par, helim dava shel tzibur. It's only if they made it an error of a loisa, say that if you did it on purpose, you would get kares. How do you know that? The Tana Rabbanim. The pasuk says, "V'noida achatos ashechato ala." Let's read the pasuk inside. The pasuk inside says, right over here, by the tzibur. If the entire congregation made this mistake and they did any of these mitzvahs, and they found out, the Bezdin found out they made a mistake, they made a mistake on this regarding this matter, then they bring a par ben bakol achatas, and that's called par helim davash tzibur. Notice this word aleha. Hey, so this aleha teaches you that you learn aleha to the aleha that's written by Isha L'chaisa. Just like when you marry two sisters, the Aveira on purpose, you get kares. So also, when we learn over here, that par that is brought when Bezdin makes a mistake is only if the type of Aveira, if b'mezid, you would have gotten kares. That's what he says. So Rabbi Oimet, Nebakan alel b'nemelahan alel. It says over here by Paramildor Shisiba alel, and it says by the Aveira of marrying two sisters alel, ma'alahan and dovish achayav as doina kares. Just like by Isha L'chaisa, you get an Aveira of kares, right? Afkan. So also the power helim dovish tzibur is only brought by something dovish is doina kares, while shigugos echatas only something that b'mezid you get kares, and b'shoigig you would get a chatas. So we see that the par helim dovish tzibur is only brought in the type of Aveira that, if, like for example, Bezdin Paskin something about Shabbos, So since that's the type of error that if you do on purpose, you get kares. So then if they made a mistake in their psak, then they would bring a par helam davar shel tzibur. Now, Ashkechan tzibur. Now I understand this story when a tzibur, the par helam davar shel tzibur, is something of a lav that has kares to it. Mashiach menolan. How do you know the kohen Mashiach, the kohen gadol? How do you know when he makes an error? And to his carbon, his par comes also for a type of aver that you get b'mezid karetz. Tiksiv b'mashiach la'ashmas ha'am. Hare Mashiach ketzibar. If you look closely, the pasuk says, but if the kohen does a sin, la'ashmas ha'am, it's as if the entire congregation did the mistake. So it teaches you that compare the kohen Mashiach to the tzibur. Just like the tzibur brings a par only if they did an avera that b'mezid you get kares. So the kohen gadol will only bring this par only if it's a type of vera. If b'mezid you get kares. Now, yachid v'nasi. How do you know that a yachid and a nasi, when do they bring a carbon chaftis? Doesn't say. Asiya mitzvahs. I have exer shava mitzvahs. Let's take a look at that. So again, a yachid that does an avera, we know this familiar carbon chatas. Nasi also bring a carbon chatas. Let's say a person ate treif. Does he bring a carbon chatas? No, because there's no b'mezid kares if you eat treif. So now, if you mechal Shabbos, then you bring this chizboy seira. Same thing over here by the president making the mistake. It's something that is doinai kares. How do you know that concept? The Torah just says if you make a mistake, bring this, but it doesn't tell you what avera you did. So since it uses the word mi mitzvah, you see it's dark over here, mitzvahs, and it says over here mitzvah. See, it's a little small, but it's parhelm davar sibur. It also uses the word mitzvah. So just like parhelm davar dibur, we know already from oleha that it's something shadoinai karis. So also yachid and nasi will bring only if a type of avera that's bizdoinai karis. That's what he says. Then we go to the next case. Okay, so now we're going to avodah zara. And how do you know by avodah zara has to be type? You're doing avodah zara. The type of avodah zara, the type of mistake in avodah zara that had you done it on purpose, you would get kares. So how do you know that's what? How do you see that? You learn it out from eine, because it says the word me'ene kol ha'eda, and over here it says me'ene. You see, by the regular par helam davar siva, it says me'ene. So just like over here me'ene, we know it's something shizudai kares. So also by avodah zara, it's the type of worship that you would get kares, like bowing down to avodah zara. Then, if it happened by accident, the whole tzibur made this mistake, then you bring a par for a chata, a par for an oila, and sorry lechatas. But not if the whole tzibur is hugged in avodah zara, which is only a lav at the worst, then they wouldn't bring this tzibur avodah zara case. And how do you know a yachid, nasi, Mashiach? How do you know what they bring the sa'ir for avodah zara, the se'ira for avodah zara? How do you know it has to be something, a type of worship that bizmezid you get kares? Miveim nefesh achas yachad. Echad yachav echad nasi v'echad Mashiach b'mashma vav moisef ala inyan rishon v'yom metachtain min ha'elyon. You learn the bottom from the top. So in other words, since it says v'im, and this is talking about yachad nasi Mashiach, so the im is like a continuation of what we know from the avodah zara of the tzibur. Just like the avodah zara of the tzibur is only by something that has bizdoinai kares. So the im teaches you by yachad nasi Mashiach that will also be something by something that's zdoinai kares. So again, Rebbe used the aleho to start this whole process to teach you that all this is talking about b'zdainai kares, all the private karbonis and regular averis and the avodah averis has to be something that b'mezid you would be chayev kares on. Comes along the Gemara and says, okay, since Rabbanan use the aleha for something else, they use the aleha isha l'chaisa to teach you don't do yibum for your sister, for your wife's sister. And all the aray is, so then high svarim and ole. How do they know this whole concept that all these carbonates, what the Torah is talking about, is only if there is a b'mezid kares. So the Gemara says, Nafka lahu mid makri le Rabbi Yeshua lebrei. They learn it out from the way Rabbi Yeshua was darshaning psukim to his son. The pasuk says, Torah achas yeh lechem lo'isi l'shkaga, v'hanefesh asher taseh biyod rama. Where does the pasuk say that? So the pasuk says, Rashi says, le'inyan carbon kasiv b'par abavodah zara, Torah kol Torah mashma, hokshu kol Torah le'inyan carbon avodah zara. That the entire every avera is compared to every avera is compared to avodah zara. That the carbon of that you would bring to avodah zara. Since avodah zara there, the pasuk says beferish, it's talking about kares. I don't have the pasuk up here, but basically, what the Rabbanim, how do Rabbanim know this concept? Because after this pasuk, when the Torah tells you to bring a carbon, if you do an avera of avodah zarah, the Torah teaches you beferish that about if you do avodah zarah on purpose, you get kares. So, and then it says Torah achas. So we learn from Torah achas that just like the Torah established that avodah zarah is only something in a avera that gets b'mezid kares, so that also any time Yachid, Nasi, and Mashiach, they do an avera, and they have to bring a regular carbon. So then that Torah achas teaches you that it's one law that applies for everything. All carbonas are only brought if you did a type of avera that b'mezid you would get kares, just like avodah zarah. It's only a type of avodah zarah that you would get kares for. So also all these carbonas on top over here would be only types of carbonas that you would get kares for. What's left is par helam davar shel tzibur. And how do you know that tzibur is only by dvar sheyesh by kares? So the tzibur is simple because the Chachamim say v'im connects the two. So just like Rebbe learned the bottom from the top, the Chachamim are going to learn top from the bottom. The tzibur is like Yachid, that will be only by Mezid by Kares, but you still need to know where do they know Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur is only by Davar Shel Dainai Kares. Let's read it inside. So this is the way the Chachamim learned. It says by after the Yachid bringing the carbon, they bring a carbon of avodah zarah. The Torah says Torah achas yilechem lo'is b'shkaga. All any avera b'shoigeg has the din like avodah zarah. Nefesh ishtash biyad ramah gets kares. So huksha kol Torah kula avodah zarah. Ma avodah zarah davar shechayav os doine kares v'shegase chatas. Af kol davar any type of avera shechayav os doine kares. Therefore, that's when you bring the shegeg this kind of chatas. So ashkechan yachav v'nasi Mashiach. Bein by the avodah bein mishar mitzvahs. Tzibur b'avodah zarah minol. Like I said, the bottom. Like this. How do you know by tzibur avodah zarah? How do you know it's only by something shezadonai kares? Amakra v'nefesh v'im nefesh. V'yomid elyon mitachtim. We learn the top from the bottom. Now el tzibur b'shar mitzvahs minolan. How do you know tzibur with other mitzvahs? How do you know that par helam davar tzibur is something by zadonai kares? So there, yalaf me'ene me'ene. Again, they will learn me'ene me'ene. It says over here me'ene by par helam davar tzibur, and we already established that by desire of a tzibur is only something zadonai kares because you learn it from Yachid, right? Yachid Nasi Mashiach, because they're so connected to each other. So therefore, just like this was by avodah zarah, it says the word me'ene, and it says me'ene by par helam davar shel tzibur. So par helam davar shel tzibur is also something shezadonai kares. Fine. Now the Gemara is going to say back again. Rebbe hay Torah achas ma'il avidlei. What does he do with this? Although it says that Torah achas yilechem lo yisem b'shchacha. What does that teaches you? So me'boyelei lekitahanya. That teaches you another interesting idea, that there's one law for even a group that does avodah zarah. The Torah gives you new halachas ben yechidim lemerubim. that when one individual does avodah zarah on purpose to a lot of people. Why? Yechidim, if there's one person doing avodah zarah, we know he gets skila. Leficha mamoylim polit. Therefore, his money is not destroyed. I mean, his family inherits his money. Merubim, but let's say you have one city doing avodah zarah, and that is the concept that's written in the Torah about ir hanidachas, where the Torah says, "Besai, if you kill out everybody by the sword," and they burn the whole city down. So we see a city doing avodah zarah is very different than it has different halachas, especially regarding their property and regarding the way you kill them, than a yachid. So yochel nachle bekarbon same. So I might have thought that when a city does avodah zarah, there's a new halacha of karbanos that you have to bring for them. I would think they don't fall on the rega halacha of a sa'ira that you bring for an avodah zarah. How would you atone for one city doing avodah zarah? Does everybody bring their own carbon? Talmud that there's one law that even if a whole city does an avodah zarah, everybody in the city has to bring, if they did it by mistake, everybody has to bring their own carbon chatas. So when is it that you bring this carbon chatas for avodah zarah? If the entire tzibur does, if the ganz Klal Yisrael, most of Klal Yisrael does avodah zarah by mistake, then they bring one carbon, parachad la'olah, a series of mechatas. But if it's one whole city, even though there are different halachas how you treat a city that does avodah zarah on purpose, but if it's by mistake, each person in the city has a din like a yachid and they have to bring their own eiz lechatas, sa'ir lechatas, eiz bas shnasa lechatas. Fine. So now let us go back to the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Maskif lo Rav Chilkiya mehagroina. He asked the question, time of the cost of Rachmar Tarachas Yelachem. If the Torah, the whole reason why we know this din, that an entire city that does avodah zarah, they bring, each one has to bring their own chatas. Every member of the city brings their own chatas because the Torah says Torah achas yilchem, that there's one Torah. A yachid and a city have one Torah, no separate dinim. Like I would have thought that an entire city that does avodah zarah, it's very different. They have to bring, everybody has to bring collectively. Maybe they bring one carbon. Okay, and that's different. My lysi, then what would they bring? I mean, what would you think they could bring? Lysi par, should they bring a cow? Tzibur b'shar mitzvah sudamaisi. The tzibur brings that. You see, what the Gemara is going to do is that how could you say a city, if the entire city does an avodah zarah, they have to bring a special carbon? What special carbon should they bring? If they bring a par, that's reserved for a par helam davar shel tzibur by other mitzvahs, right? If they bring kizbor seira, that's generally for a yachid, and for avodah zarah of a tzibur. If the entire Jewish people did avodah zarah, then you do a par la'olah and a season lachatas. So so what are you going to have them bring? I mean, there's no carbon left for them to bring that will differentiate them. That's what the Gemara says. Laisi par tzibur b'shar mitzvah sudamaisi. That's something reserved for tzibur when they sin with all other mitzvahs. Kizba, a sheep, yachid b'shar mitzvah sudamaisi. So nasi b'shar mitzvah sudamaisi. Par la'oilo si lachatas, which is, remember, that's by tzibur by zarah hudamaisi. Ve'elamai, what would you expect them to bring? If the entire city does an avodah zarah, what should they bring? One seira? Well, that's the same thing as a yachid nami, hainu karboni. The yachid also brings a seira for their avodah zarah. That's not called differentiating a city from a yachid. So the Gemara says, Itzrach, I need it. I would have thought, in a tzibur that makes a mistake in avodah zarah, maisi par la'oila v'siyar lechatas. So in a city that makes a mistake, I'll tell them naisi ipcha. They'll do the opposite. They will bring a seir la'oila and a par lechatas. So I would have thought that kamash malan Torah achas or iname tzarech. A city would need a kapara ve'ein takana. There's no way to fix an entire city except dismantle them, and everybody should go their own way because they have no takana. There's no carbon for them. Kamash Malan, no. If an entire city, even if every single person in that city did avodah zarah, you still can't do what you would do for a tzibur, that one carbon for everybody. Every person has to bring their and carbon individually, a seira like a yachid who does an avera of avodah zara, they bring a seira. So even if it's entire city, although b'mezid, if entire city does avodah zara, there's different halachas. They get sreifa and you keep their money. But if it's by accident, then every person in the city brings their own seira as a carbon. The Gemara, new Gemara, Amar Levi Rebbe. Rebbe said to Rebbe, "My ear yeditani tezvav." Why does our Mishnah say 15? Listen to Tezayin. Let our Mishnah say that there's 16. So that's what Levi asked Rebbe. And we'll see what his question is. What should be number 16? Amalei, so Rebbe said, you don't have to explain what's in your head. If you're asking such a question, it must be you have no brains in your skull. Because my daitech, what are you thinking? Imoy anusus aviv. The case of Imoy anusus aviv, I'll explain you what this case is. Imoy anusus aviv plukte the Rebbe Yehuda v'Rabbanan, uve plukte loikomairi. Imoy and anusus aviv is a machlokes between Rebbe Yehuda and Rabbanan. So that's why it's not number 16, because it will only go according to one opinion, not the other. And therefore, our Mishnah does not want to get involved in a machlokes. What is Imay Anusas Aviv? So here's the case. You have Levi. Levi is married. Levi and Miriam are husband and wife, right? Then number 2 is they had a son called Shimon. Number 3, Levi didn't marry Shifra, he raped Shifra. He was Ma'anas Shifra. And because he was Ma'anas Shifra, he had a son, Menashe, from that relationship. Okay? Now Shimon went and married Shifra, his father's Anusa, his father's, the person that his father had an affair with. Now that is permitted because it's not his mother. It's not the wife of his father, because it was an illicit relationship between Levi and Shifra. So Shimon married Shifra. And he also married Leah. Guess what? Shimon dies. Now Shimon's Leah and Shifra fall to Menashe, right? So they fall to Ya'la. So the Gemara says that this is a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda, who says Shifra is not permitted to Shimon. Shifra is also to Shimon, and therefore it's impossible for Shimon to have fallen to Menashe for Yibam. So therefore Leah is Aser. According to Rabbanan, you are permitted to marry Shifra, and therefore this case could be could be a case of where Shifra would fall to Yibam. So basically, it was impossible according to Rabbi Yehuda, it was not permitted for Shimon to marry Shifra. And therefore, this case cannot exist according to Rabbi Yehuda, that a person's mother should fall to him to Yibam. So this doesn't exist according to Rabbi Yehuda. Therefore, our Mishnah doesn't get involved in machlokes, and that's why it's not listed as a case. So that's what Rebbe is telling Levi. What do you think? It should talk about that case. The Mishnah doesn't want to get involved in machlokes. V'loi, what do you mean? The Mishnah doesn't want to get involved in machlokes. For a Isser mitzvah ve'Isser kedusha, the pligi Rabbi Kiva Rabbanim v'katani. There's a possibility that the Mishnayos do get involved in machlokes. And for example, let's say a brother married a mamzer. So according to the Chachamim, the brother was permitted to marry this mamzer. When he dies, the mamzeres and the co-wife fall to Yibam. So technically, according to the Chachamim, you have to do chalitza, not Yibam, because technically you would say essay daichelaisa say over here. So therefore, according to Chachamim, you would do Yibam. But according to Rabbi Akiva, who said that the brother could not have had any kedushin with the mamzeres, according to Rabbi Akiva, this case would be impossible to fall to Yibam because the brother was not allowed to marry this mamzeres. And therefore, the Mishnayos later on in another parak get involved with this machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbanim. What are you telling me that Yevamos has no machlokes in it? And for the Gemara, Bekirkan Ka Amrin. In our parak, we don't get involved with machlekes. Says the Gemara, Beishamai Matir and Esatzaris La'achin Beisilul Eisrim. Oh, it's a beautiful, lenient opinion of Beishamai that you have to know that we're going to see in Daf Yud Gimel, where Beishamai says always the co-wife is permitted. And Beis Hillel says it's not. So our Mishnah, our first Mishnah of the Masechta, can only go according to Beis Hillel, who say that the co-wife is also, because according to Beis Shammai, this is a new opinion we never encountered before, the co-wife is permitted. And says the Gemara, Beis Shammai, Bimkoin Beis Hillel, ain't a Mishnah. Beis Shammai, when we compare Beis Shammai to Beis Hillel, it's not even a machlekes. It's always hands down Beis Hillel. So that is not a problem for our Mishnah to go according to Beis Hillel versus Beis Shammai. That's not taking sides in the machlekes. Now the Gemara says, "Varei eishes achav shaloi hoyo loi ba'olamai, the pligi Rab Shimon Rabbanan vikatani." There is a machlekes between eishes achav shaloi hoyo ba'olamai. What is that case? So Ruvain married. You have two brothers, Ruvain and Shimon, right? And Ruvain married a lady, Esther, and Ruvain died without children. And before Shimon did Yibam, another brother, Levi, was born. Then Shimon did Yibam. So the Gemara says that if Levi was born before Shimon did Yibam, right? And then Levi did Yibam. So then there's a machlokes between pardon me. Let's take it back for a second. We have Eishes Achav Shalei Hoyle Be'alamai. We always are of the opinion that you don't that this Eishes Ach Shalei Hoyle Be'alamai, that third brother that was born later on, the woman would not fall to Yibam to him. But according to Rabbi Shimon argues, and he holds you need chalitza. So the whole concept of Eishes Achav Shaloi Hoyle Be'alamai, which is one of the 15 cases in our Mishnah, is subject to a machlekes between Rab Shimon and the Chachamim. Chachamim say you don't need Yibam and Chalitza, but Rab Shimon says you do need Chalitza. So our Mishnah is picking sides going according to Rabbanim, that Eishes Ach Shaloi Hoyle Be'alamai doesn't need anything. So the Gemara says Rab Shimon would agree in a certain case that that you don't need anything. See, when did Rab Shimon disagree with the Rabbanan? If before Levi was born, Shimon already married Esther. Raven died. Esther was falling to Yibam to Shimon. Shimon did Yibam to her. Then Levi was born. Then, if Shimon dies, according to Rab Shimon, this Esther is not usher on Levi anymore because it's completely Shimon's wife. He never even knew Reuven at all. All he knows when he was born that Shimon was married to Esther. So yes, in that case, Reb Shimon would disagree with the Chachamim. Chachamim says, no, you can't do anything. Esther's potter from everything. According to Reb Shimon, at the very least, this Esther is mechayev in Chalitza. But Reb Shimon would agree that if Levi was born prior to Esther doing Yibam with Shimon doing Yibam with Esther, it means Reuven died. Esther was still in limbo. And then Levi was born. Since at that point, Levi was an Eishes Ach Shaloi Hoyle Be'alamai with Esther, and she was not yet married to Shimon. If Shimon goes ahead and marries Esther, and then Shimon dies, then Esther will fall to Yibam to Levi. Even Reb Shimon would agree that Levi doesn't have to do anything, Yibam or Chalitza. So it's not really a machlekes. There is a case of Eishes Ach Shaloi Hoyle Be'alamai that shall go away with anything. So that's Benoiled V'Lebsaif Yibam. If he was born first, Levi was born first, and then you do Yibam, like Paul Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon would not disagree with the Chachamim that you don't need anything. So the Gemara says, "V'amar Reb Yishaya Chalal Koy Reb Shimon Aparishana or Yitosev by Rabbi Shaya." That the Gemara says that Rabbi Oishia said, "Oh, Reb Shimon always argues." and always holds that Levi must do chalitza. So the Gemara says no. Rabbi Aishia was disproved. In other words, Rab Shimon would agree in one case of Noilad, if the Levi was born and then Shimon did Yibam, in that case you don't need anything. So since that's the case, Rab Shimon would agree with Rabbi Banan. So the Mishnah of our Mishnah could also go according to the Rabbanan. Let us just begin this Gemara, this one line of Gemara, and then we'll continue it tomorrow. A lot to talk about. Gemara says over here, there is a possibility. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Bekulan anikara behen." It's possible to have, in all cases of the Mishnah, this idea with achois zukuka, two sisters falling to yibim, and either both of them will be aser to yabim, one will be mutter, and one will be aser, or both of them will be mutter to do yibim. So the Gemara, let's take one case. You have two sisters that are aser to miyabim. Levi, Reuven, Shimon, Yehuda, four brothers. Shimon and Reuven married two sisters, and then they both died. The two sisters are now falling to Yibam to Levi and Yehuda. In both cases, since the two sisters falling to Yibam, technically, although from different brothers, still they should only do Chalitza, not Yibam over here, because Shtein Asuris. None of them, Levi can't do Yibam with any Rachel and Leah, and Yehuda can't do Yibam either with Rachel or Leah, and neither can Levi do. That would be the case. Now, Achas Mutaris Nisyabim, Achas Isura would be if Reuven and Levi, Yehuda, Reuven and Shimon were married to two sisters, correct? But Rachel had a daughter, another daughter called the daughter of Rachel. It doesn't give her a name. We'll call her the Bas Rachel. And Levi married the daughter of Rachel, which was the daughter of Reuven. Now that Reuven and Shimon died, so now, since Levi would never do Yibam with Rachel, right? Because this Rachel is his mother-in-law. So therefore, Levi could do Yibam with Rachel's sister Leah, because the only one that's falling to Yibam to Levi is Leah, and therefore it's not like two sisters falling at the same time. Therefore, Leah can do Yibam with Levi. Yehuda will be Asar on both of them, because to Yehuda, since he's not married to a erva of any one of these things, so Yehuda, since all that's falling to Yibam to Yehuda is Rachel and Leah, Yehuda can't do Yibam with any one of them. So therefore, one brother is permitted to do Yibam, the other brother, Yehuda, remains also to do Yibam. Let's go to one last case, and then we'll stop. Here's a case where both of them are mutter to be miyabim. For example, Levi, Reuven, Shimon, Yehuda are brothers. Then Rachel, Yehuda married the daughter of Leah, right? Married the daughter of Leah from a different marriage, probably not Shimon's daughter, because Shimon has no children. And Reuven married the daughter of Rachel from a different marriage, not related. So Reuven had no children when he died. Shimon had no children when he died, but each one married the daughter of their brother's wife from a different marriage. Now that Reuven and Shimon died, each one could do the Yibam to the other one. In other words, Yehuda could do Yibam to Yellow. Yehuda could do Yibam to Rachel, because Leah never fell to Yibam to Yehuda, because Leah, Yehuda's other wife, was the daughter of Leah. So his mother-in-law is falling to Yibam. That wouldn't work. So then he is permitted to do Yibam with Rachel. Since Levi is married to an erva to the daughter of Rachel, when Rachel falls to Yibam, Levi can't do Yibam with her, but he's permitted to do Yibam with Leah. So we have a case of two sisters falling in Yibam, and both of them will be mutter to Yabam to the opposite brother. Okay, now we're going to continue on with this topic tomorrow. Again, we're going to try to prove that our Mishnah does get involved with machlekes. Okay. Gute Nacht.